All right, it's Mr. McMurray here with the It's Thursday, Not Quite Friday blues. All right, here we go. So we're going to talk about muscular system worksheet. First couple questions through 12, hopefully. We'll see if we get how far we get. But you also need to have a sheet of paper to take some notes. We're going to take some extra notes. So we'll kind of go through the worksheet, but we're also going to add some enrichment notes that you might want to write down on a piece of note paper. So here we go. Number one, why are all muscle cells called muscle fibers? Actually, technically, I think in the book it says cardiac muscles are not. So really, it's just the smooth and the skeletal muscles. Why are they called muscle fibers? Well, if you think of fibers like hair fibers, something like that, long and skinny. And so skeletal and smooth muscle cells are elongated, very long and stretched out. So instead of calling them muscle cells, we call them muscle fibers, but it's the same difference as a cell. Just a unique shape. Nerve fibers are called the same thing. Why? Because they're long and skinny cells. All right. So fibers, just meaning that. Now, a couple other things. Contraction of the muscle is due to shortening of microfilaments and myofibrils. Okay, microfilaments, if you remember way back when we did the cell, are little filaments or threads in the cell. And in muscle cells, they have a special kind called myofibrils. Okay, myofibrils, which myo means muscle and fibril means fiber, so it's basically really saying little muscle fibers inside the muscle fiber or cell. All right. Anytime we see myo or mys, M-Y-S, generally that means muscle. Okay, comes from the same word as M-U-S, mus, which is the genus for mice. When they first saw muscles rippling under the surface, I guess it made them think like little mice running around under your skin as they saw the muscles ripple. Someone doing the arm, the display, I guess, a lot of muscles to make it run around like mice. But anyhow, the same word there. All right. Another word you'll also hear is sarco. Okay, sarco has to do with flesh. Okay. Flesh just means muscle. When we talk about the flesh that we eat of animals, what we're eating is their muscle tissue, okay? And so flesh or sarco, you'll see both of those when we talk about muscles a lot of times popping up. All right, just to show you a muscle cell. This whole thing is a muscle cell, okay? This would be like the plasma membrane, but it has its own special name called the sarcolemma plasma membrane. Sarco, flesh, lemma means covering, so it's the membrane covering all the muscle, okay? The muscle covering membrane, but basically it's the plasma membrane, okay? So sarcolemma is just another name for the plasma membrane, it has a special name. All right, a myofibril, there we go, there's the little fibers which make up, and basically that's most of what a muscle cell is. It's just a bundle of these little myofibrils, okay? Notice there's a nucleus, several nuclei in fact, okay, in this cell. Some of them are multinucleate. All right, and they have these light bands and dark bands that we will talk about later. Okay, now, basically, in number two, you have two main groups of muscles. You have voluntary muscles, which are subject to your control. You can consciously control them and make them do something. Okay, and you have involuntary, which are not under your conscious control. All right, for example, I can choose to close my eye, both eyes. Woo. Okay, and that would be a voluntary muscle. Now, it's true that if someone throws something at my face, I will blink involuntarily as a reflex, okay? But because I can control that muscle if I want to, it's still considered a voluntary muscle, okay? Involuntary, on the other hand, you can't do much about. You don't sit around thinking, oh, I need to squeeze the food down my intestines. It's probably a good thing because most of us would never get around to doing that. Okay, and so it's involuntary. It does it without us even thinking about it. All right, now let's talk about skeletal, some of the different types of muscle real quick, and then we'll go over the chart. Basically, skeletal muscle is attached by tendons to the bone. Okay, the tendon is the end of the muscle, and then it turns into a fibrous tendon, and that attaches it to the bone. They are multinucleate. There's, like we showed in the drawing earlier, that was a skeletal muscle, and you may have several nuclei, multiple nuclei, all in the same cell. Okay, probably partly because they are so long. Okay, they are striated, which means that when you look at them, you see the banding. You get dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light. You see this banding pattern over and over, so they're called striated muscle. All right, and they are voluntary. We can control these skeletal muscles. Like I said, they may be part of reflexes that happen involuntarily, but we can voluntarily control them, so they are considered voluntary muscles. All right, cardiac muscles look fairly similar. This should be reddish if it were colored like the other one, but I don't have a color picture of cardiac muscle. All right, but it looks a lot like skeletal muscle, except instead of long tubes, these tubes can branch off, and you can see how they can branch into other muscle cells. Okay, so these are the branching cells. Okay, so they branch. Otherwise, they look like. Also, where they come together, you see these little boundaries. These are called intercalated discs. Okay, intercalated just means where they join together here, the little dark things. So you'll see those, and they will branch, and that tells you cardiac versus skeletal muscle. They are only found in the walls of the heart, not the blood vessels, for example. Those are smooth muscles, okay? But it's only found in the actual heart tissue. They are striated, have dark and light, dark and light, dark and light banding, but they only have one nucleus. Even though this branches off and goes here, there's just one nucleus per cell of heart muscle. And it is involuntary. We don't have to sit around thinking about our heart beating. Same thing. That would take forever. Just breathing, your heart, you're pushing your food down your intestines, all those different things that have to go on. You wouldn't have time to think about anything else, all right, like school or something like that. So, anyhow, it is an involuntary muscle. All right, smooth muscle, on the other hand, does not have striations, okay? It doesn't have those bands on it. Now, you notice some lines here where they're showing it to give it texture, but it doesn't have those bands of just light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, okay? So no striations. It's what we call spindle shape, which means it gets bigger in the middle and it tapers toward the end. Sometimes they're called tapered cells, but spindle shaped, okay? So they're fatter in the middle and then they get thinner toward the ends. They also have a single nucleus, just like the cardiac, and they are involuntary, no conscious control over them. A lot of your organs, like I said, squeezing your intestines and squishing your stomach muscles and stuff are smooth muscles, okay? And they do their thing without us having to think about it. All right, and so found mainly in the walls of hollow organs like intestines and stomach and things like that. Solid tissues like, say, a liver are not going to have smooth muscle contractions, kidney and stuff like that. But the hollow ones, like your whole digestive system and things like that, will be that. Your bladder, okay, stuff like that. All right. All right, so let's go over the list real quick. Voluntarily controlled would only be your skeletal muscles. Allows you to move your eyeball would be your skeletal muscle because you can do that intentionally. The internal volume, in other words, make it get smaller, is the cardiac muscles. When they squeeze together, they actually make the chamber inside them get smaller, which pushes the blood out. Okay. Whereas, like if your intestines squeeze, they squish the food down here, but it's just that, well, it gets smaller here, but it gets bigger there. So ultimately, the volume of the organ does not really change a whole lot, according to that. Okay. Single nucleus per cell is going to be your cardiac muscles and also your smooth muscles. So you got one nucleus for each one. They are made of long, non-branching. Key thing is non-branching, so this would be skeletal. All right. Found attached to bones. Once again, it's going to be skeletal. Cells have a striations or the banded appearance. It's going to be true of skeletal, but also of cardiac. Involuntary control is also going to be true of your cardiac. You don't think about that. And your smooth muscles. You don't have to think about that. They just do their job without us thinking about them, which is a good thing. All right. Found in the walls of stomach, uterus, arteries, etc. would be the smooth muscle. Okay, those are all hollow body organs. Spindle shape, but they tapered at the ends, not cylindrical. All right, would be smooth. Locomotion of the body of the whole, moving your whole body around is mostly your skeletal's job. Circulatory pump would be your heart. Multinucleate means more than one nucleus, and so that's going to be true of the skeletal. And changing the size and shape of the organs would be the smooth, okay? So notice size and shape of the organs, but changing the internal volume, making it smaller on the inside, just crunching it down to make the whole thing smaller, is going to be the heart. Okay, that's the one that people tend to get confused, so just remember that. All right? All right. Now, the next question, number 4 on your paper, says, why aren't muscle cells ripped apart? Okay, well, the key thing is there is connective tissue. Remember, connective tissue is the most widespread tissue in the body. So around each, there we go. Okay, let me see, muscle cell. You have those little myofibrils. Well, then you have the sarcolemma, or the plasma membrane around them. That binds all those fibers together. Otherwise, it'd be real easy to shred those little myofibrils. Okay, now each muscle fiber is wrapped around by this next container, okay, which wraps them all up. Then each of these bundles of muscle fibers are wrapped again by an outside coating of connective tissue, which you notice when it gets to the end becomes the tendon down here at the bottom. Okay, so all these different layers help protect it. Okay, I want to talk just a little bit about those layers before we go on. All right. Muscle fiber, okay. All right, let me just talk about this just real quickly. So each muscle cell fiber is going to have a wrapper around it, okay, which is called the endomysium. Each bundle of muscle fiber is going to have another wrap around it called the para. Para means around, so it's the paramysium. Okay, go around the muscle, para, around, muscle, so around the muscle. And epi means on the outside or the surface, so it's outside the whole muscle over here. There's going to be this wrapper around it. And so those are the different layers. Okay, I think we have an tendon, of course, attaching it to the bone. All right, so connective tissue wrapping to the skeletal muscle. Okay, the endomysium encloses a single muscle fiber, and this would be the same as what we talked about earlier as the sarcolemma. Okay, the plasma membrane, it wraps one muscle fiber, has an endomysium around it. Bundles of fibers, which are called a fascicle. All right, we'll talk more about that later, but bundles are surrounded by the paramysium, or around it. Okay, and on the outside, you have one called the epimysium, which covers the entire muscle. All right, so you need to know those, because those are the wrappings that keep the fibers all together, because otherwise it's real easy to shred it. Okay, if you've ever taken meat, talk about the grain going with the grain or across the grain, when you cut meat, a lot of it can be kind of peeled out, and that's either fascicles or bundles of muscle fibers that are peeling out after it's been cooked. But these wrappers all hold those fibers together and keep them hopefully from shredding while you're still alive. All right. Number 5, what is tendons? They attach the muscles to bone tissues. We've talked about that. Functions of smooth muscle. We've talked about that a little bit. Movement of food through the digestive tract would be one. Emptying the bowels, which would be your poop, solid poop. Your urinary bladder, which would be your liquid waste. In females, in the uterus, smooth muscles would be responsible for the contractions that push the baby out, okay, once it's ready to be delivered. All right, so all those are functions of smooth muscles. All right, now 4 main functions of skeletal muscles, which is what we normally think of when we think of muscles. We don't think about the smooth muscles, and obviously the cardiac muscles had to do with beating the heart. The 4 functions of muscles is producing movement, okay? Now, you need to know that can include the body, obviously. Your body moves around because of your muscles, but also your digestive tract, food going through your digestive tract, moving blood through your body, which would be your cardiac muscles, okay, and so forth. So even though it says skeletal system muscle, this should just say muscle functions in general. Sorry, my bad. Okay. All right. So just various kinds of movement in your body are done by your muscles. Now, maintaining your posture. We don't think about it, but you're constantly adjusting. That's why it takes a while for a baby to stand up and to walk. You're constantly adjusting to keep yourself upright. It's a lot more complicated. We're doing a lot more muscular work than we usually think about. Just staying still even. Stabilizing your joints. Okay, if I want to move one thing, like say I'm going to move my arm to do a curl, it's also important that not only does my hand and lower arm, forearm come up, but that somebody pulls them up, but also other muscles hold my shoulder still, or otherwise it'd be just doing all this. Okay, so stabilizing the joints and keeping them from moving when you don't want them to move. And then the last thing is, as you're running and stuff, well, you get hotter. Well, that's because your muscles burn a lot of sugar and energy, and so that generates a lot of your heat, and it maintains your body temperature, which is important. If you get cold, you can just go run around a little bit and warm up. All right, that's it for this one. We'll see you on the next one.